loves, how are you? It's Claudia. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the series, Wine, Women, and Words. I'm having sangria tonight. Estoy teniendo sangría, el vino de España. Este sangría es el producto de España. Se llama Sierra. It's just so good. Tonight, I am sharing a bit about one of my favorite of all time authors. This is Chloe Anthony Walford Morrison, better known as Toni Morrison. She was an American novelist, essayist, editor, teacher, and professor emeritus at Princeton University. Her first novel, The Bluest Eye, was published in 1970. She was born February 18th, 1931 in Lorain, Ohio. She died August 5th, 2019. Some of her awards: the Nobel Prize in Literature, Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Loves, Toni Morrison was such a prolific writer. I am in awe every time I learn something else about her. And this list of her works keeps going on and on. So let me just say, I've read Beloved, The Bluest Eye. I've taught also Beloved and The Bluest Eye. I've also taught Song of Solomon. I taught Sula. I read Jazz. I read and loved Paradise. I also used Paradise in college board workshops when I would go out as a consultant to teach teachers who were teaching advanced students with AP. I also taught Paradise, sections of it, to advanced, to AP English teachers to show them how they could use parts of the work in their instruction. I just finished reading Love, and that is the one I'm going to share with you tonight. Oh, this is the cover of the book, Love. Let's see if you all can see it. Love was so mesmerizing. You know, and it wasn't that long. Just like most of Toni Morrison's books, they don't go 300, 400, 500 pages. It's probably in its written form 200 and something pages. But it is the story of the cozy women, the C-O-S-E-Y women. Bill Cozy is the patriarch at the center of this story. But even though he was the wealthy patriarch who had most things his way in a time still in America where it was difficult for a black man to own so much and have so much money and control as he had, because he was an entrepreneur, he was a hotel owner, a property owner, but he was very accomplished to capture that, to master that, to own what he had, to claim what he had in his life. But to me, the heart of the story is centered around the cozy women. The women in Cozy's life. The women who made up his wives, his first wife, Julia. The one we see, Julia, with him tenderly holding her as he brought her to the water and took her out of the water. But we see Julia in his arms, and he's like, almost like he's taking her to the water to baptize her to help heal her himself, and then bring her back, and her arm is around his neck, and if you could just have seen that or read it, you would see how tender he was with her. So the second wife is a child that is named Heed the Night. I have always loved Toni Morrison's choice of names for her characters. Heed the Night is amazing. And she dies at night. At least I think she dies at night, because it could have been Christine who died. I love the way she leaves it ambiguous in certain parts. Like in Paradise, it's ambiguous which woman was which, or who was shot first, because they shoot the white girl first in Paradise, yet you never know which one was the white girl. Because one of Toni Morrison's intent when she started writing that was to write a novel where color was not the center of the issue, but women and their plights and their paradises and houses in which they loved. Back to the women. Heed. Heed was the child's name. Heed the Night. She was from the Johnson clan, a clan that almost every respectable black person in this little town of Silk absolutely abhorred, because her Johnson clan of folks were just the lowest of the lowest life, and yet she came from them. And perhaps Bill Cozy chose her to aggravate the other women in the story who thought of themselves as much, much higher. For example, May. Now, May is Christine's mother. May, I've read this book once, and I started it again last night, so I'm going to reread it just because Morrison is that deep and wide and rolling and just visceral, and you have to read her again and again to really sink your teeth into the meat of her stories. But May is the granddaughter of Bill Cozy, and her daughter is Christine. So Christine and Heed were little girls growing up together. They're the same age. I think Christine is a year older, a couple of months older than Heed. But they were running together as little girls on the beach when Bill Cozy, a man of 51 at the time, he may have been between 51 and 55, when he sees her in his house, looks at her when she comes in to go to the bathroom before they head to the beach, she and Christine, and he talks to her like, whose daughter are you? Where are you from? And then as she goes by, he asks, of course, what's her name? And as she goes by, he pinches her nipple. And it sends a jolt of electricity through her. I mean, she's a child. She didn't even have a breast. She had an areola because she was a child with a flat chest. But Cozy was a pedophile, amongst other things, because he married this child soon afterwards. So you have May, his granddaughter, via marriage. And you have Christine, May's daughter, and then Heed, Christine's girlfriend, and you have Elle. And Elle is an older woman who is well respected and liked by the other women, and she keeps the peace between the fighting groups of women because May is at odds with her own daughter and Heed, of course, because Heed is Cozy's wife. But she tries to instill venom and poison into Christine to hate Heed for being Cozy's wife. And then there's another young lady from the newer generation who comes into the story as an 18-year-old. and her name is Junior. Junior, like a man's name, Junior Vivian. She put an E on her mother's name and created her last name, Junior Vivian. So beautifully creative. I love you, Toni Morrison. The women were working in the hotel that Cozy owned in various forms. Christine, in various ways. Christine was doing the cooking and the cleaning. He was trying her best to be a wife to a grown man. And mind you, she was still a child, so she's trying her best to be a wife. And Elle is trying to keep the peace, as I said before, between these different women. And May is trying to make sure her daughter, she and her daughter, get what is due to them as far as passing down of the property and the seaside resort, because she doesn't want somebody else to get it, and that somebody else would be Cozy's wife, Heed. But can you imagine that Cozy was trying to give the hotel and land away to another woman whose name was, what did they call this woman? They had a name for her. Celestial. Come on now. You got to give Morrison credit for that. Her name, the woman's name was Celestial. And she was one of the women that Bill Cozy would go out on the beach with at night or whenever he pleased and frolic with her. And so Christine and her little friend Heed would say, "Hey, Celestial," because that is the name they heard a man calling to this woman on the beach. And then she would stop and wink at them and made them feel a certain kind of special way, because she was a gaming, sporting woman who did what she pleased and went where she wanted to go. And, you know, she was just one of those women who didn't fall into the mode of mother, grandmother, subservient to a man. A man was obviously calling after her, and her name was Celestial. So May knew that he was trying to give everything to someone else, and Elle realized that someone else later was Celestial, so she put a stop to that. But I won't pull all the plugs for the story, but I hope to say enough to whet your appetite. And you will need to be persistent to read the story and know what's up, because at certain points you will feel like, oh my God, she is so deep. This is so thoughtful and provocative. So you have to push through it. And I had to push through it. And I love Toni Morrison. So you can't be a reader who is so flighty and whimsical in nature that you just throw it down and give it up. You might fast read some parts and then go back and thoroughly read it later, but you will have to challenge yourself to finish. But nonetheless, so while these women are at odds throughout the story with Cozy, who is doing his thing in every kind of way he knows to do it, because he's a man, you have at the end such a revelation with these women. I came to love them much deeper than when I started, because I discovered certain things about the women. I discovered that Christine and Heed were friends and who truly loved one another. And sometimes even as children we can meet someone else and just love them, just wholeheartedly love them with a love that will last throughout life. And I should have known that because of the way they went head to head throughout the novel. But what was keeping them from one another was Cozy, when he separated them by marrying Heed. Then you put together a force amongst women that allows them to fight throughout life. And then at the end of life, at the end of the story, the readers, myself included, found out how deeply they loved one another, and how May and Cozy were responsible for these girls being in a place of enemies, or not quite enemies, frenemies, throughout the novel. But love always prevails, all end. But the little girl who comes in at 18, Junior, she is the catalyst at the end of the novel to help Heath, who wants to write a story capturing the essence of the cozy women for all times, for posterity. But she can't because her hands are claw-like. And that is what made me think that she was the one that passed at the end of the novel, because she couldn't grasp anything. Her hands were like this, so she couldn't write. And that's why she was putting in the newspaper an ad to get someone to come out, hopefully a young person, to work for her and do the writing for her. Plus, she wanted to rewrite Cozy's will that was found on a napkin so that she could make sure that she got what was coming to her as a Johnson, as a what Solitude Johnson, I believe, was her real name. And I say that like, because it could have been, it wasn't her mother's name or her sister. It had to be her name. Her real name was Solitude Johnson. But she was trying to make sure she got what was hers. But you can't take anything out of this world with you. She was already in the milieu of the house and the hotel and living in the hotel. So that is what she had. She was elevated beyond her group by being in the hotel and being Cozy's wife. So now I believe Christine is the woman who survives at the end of the novel to have everything she was either running away from because she was being so abused by Cozy and her mother May that she had to go out and join the Black Panthers, and she married. He was abusive. She was just a gaming, roaming woman herself. And as her girlfriend Heath said at the end, you know, were you really a whore? And Christine says, no. I mean, I had to do what I had to do in my life, but no. Were you? It was so mesmerizingly beautiful, you guys. It was so beautiful. And this little girl who comes in and helps them, Junior, well, she's paid. She is a frisky little modern day, don't care, no underwear, short dresses. Yeah, she's doing her thing. Tossing and flipping the boys like they're supposed to be tossing and flipping her, according to the ideology of the town. But she had Roman's mind so blown he didn't know if he was coming or going. And his father, Sadler, he was like, well, son, what did you, well, his grandfather, well, son, what did you do? How did you handle her? He was like, he had to find a way to say what wasn't true because she handled him. But she takes, at the end, she takes Heath to the house that is basically abandoned, the big cozy house. Heath is trying to find some information for her book and also find the some information dealing with the hereditary, who was going to get what, the will. But she didn't know that that would be her last resting place, because I think he was the one who passed when she fell and broke her ankle and something else inside of her. That she said, told Christine she felt like something else had been jarred awry. But I loved at the end when Christine, I believe, is in the kitchen and Roman is driving Heath's body to the mortuary. However, Heath's ghost is in the kitchen talking to Christine, negotiating on what to do with Junior. Should they keep her in the house? I mean, she could be a help, and they were, and Christine was older, or beat her and call the ambulance. But they were going to call the ambulance. Roman was taking someone to the mortuary, and one of them to the mortuary, and the other one was needing an ambulance. It still could have been Christine, because Christine was in the best shape, I would say. But maybe Christine had to get checked out too. I don't know. Or maybe she was going to beat Junior so much until she would need the ambulance. It was just amazing to me. Cheers. Wine, Women, and Words. Thank you so much for watching this video. I enjoyed sharing with you Toni Morrison's novel, Love, from 2008. It was a novel that was a frame novel that started with the voice of an omniscient character, a character who was unnamed, but I think the character was Elle, one of the characters in the story who kept peace amongst the cozy women. And this particular character, whoever it is, if it is Elle or an anonymous character, this character ushered Cozy out of here and allowed the women to settle their disputes and differences and to come into their love for one another on their own terms. As she said, she could not let Cozy get away with it. Now, love you so much. Bye. See you in the next video. Besitos y abracitos a todo el mundo. Little kisses and hugs to everyone. And do not forget, ever, ever, ever stand in your own spotlight.